So, good morning, Heather Willis. Thank you for being here today. So, we're going to do a brief interview for the Jack Layton Chair. And I would like to introduce myself, and then I'll introduce you, and then we'll go into the question. Right?
Thank you. Sounds
Okay.
good.
So, my name is Lareinea Ryan. I'm a student at Ryerson University. My major is social work, and I'm doing a minor in psychology. I also attended the Jack Layton Chair Leadership School, and I'm also volunteering, doing volunteer right now. So that's why I'm interviewing you. Yeah, and a little bit about me. Like I went to George Brown College, and I did community work there. So I got a diploma, and then I came to Ryerson. And my background, I'm African Caribbean, and I moved here in my late teens, and I lived in Montreal, and then I live here. Yeah, I like Toronto because it's very diverse. I learned a bit of French in Montreal, which I'm grateful for. And I was also an orphan too, so that kind of pushed me into social work. And I'm very happy that I did community work because I like the idea that I learned more about the community before going into social work, because social work more deals with one-on-one. Yeah, so I'm going to introduce you now, Heather Willis. Thanks again for being here. So Heather Willis is a Ryerson inaugural accessibility coordinator, suited within the Office of the Vice President, Equity and Community Inclusion. She leads Access Ryerson, a cross-campus initiative with a goal to identify, remove, and prevent accessibility barriers and promote the full inclusion of Ryerson community members with disability. So Heather has been an activist in areas of accessibility and improving the lives of persons with disabilities since she was a teenager growing up in an institution for disabled children, and has served on the variety of boards and committees dedicated to the inclusion of persons with disability. Most recently, she completed a term as president of the Canadian Disability Studies Association, and she currently sits on the Metropolitan Accessibility Advisory Committee and serves on the board of directors of Tangled Arts and Disability. So again, welcome, Heather. It's a pleasure to have you here for this interview for the Jack Layton Short. This interview is part of the Social Justice During COVID-19 series put together by the Jack Layton Share. So thank you again on behalf of Jack Layton Share for being here. It's a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure for you to be interviewing you today. So I'll start off by asking you a few questions, and you'll have a chance to ask me as well. So my first question to you is, can you give me an overall description of what the work that you do?
Sure. So my role was created in 2010 as a direct response to the obligations under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the AODA. So the AODA, it was Canada's first accessibility legislation. It's provincial legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And initially there's 5 standards under the AODA, and initially the customer service standard was the first one to be implemented. And at that time, the responsibility for that landed in human resources. And they very quickly realized that they were not going to be able to do all of the work that was going to be required under the AODA, sort of as the expression goes, on the side of their desk. So in addition to what people were already doing. So they created my position. So the AODA is about removing barriers. So it's setting a minimum standard of accessibility in 5 categories. So I mentioned customer service. There's also information and communication, employment, transportation, and the design of public spaces.
Okay.
So my role is about creating more accessibility overall. So Ryerson has academic accommodation supports, and their role is to facilitate individual accommodation, whereas what I'm doing is creating systemic change. And so Access Ryerson was created as an initiative to do that. So we have a steering committee of senior leaders, and then there's a variety of working groups that are led by the areas that are responsible for them. I participate in all of those working groups, but I don't lead them. And underpinning the Access Ryerson initiative is a number of principles and values that underpin and really direct how that work is done. And it actually relates to a couple of things that I've already said. So I've said that there's a steering committee of senior leadership. One of our principles is senior leadership. So there needs to be buy-in at the top around accessibility. AODA is not just about checking a box. We want to always go beyond what the legislation requires, because we know we can completely fulfill the requirements under AODA and still have lots of barriers. So we're always looking to go beyond what is strictly required.
Okay.
So that looks like, so that's a broad view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds great. Sounds like you're doing very well of work there. And I appreciate that because I have used accessibility at Ryerson and it was very helpful to me. So I appreciate that. And I like the fact that you said that your job entails breaking down barriers because it's necessary to break down barriers when working with disabilities. So my next question for you now is, can you tell me what you're currently working on and how has COVID-19 changed that in light, like how is it affecting your job right now?
So in addition to those principles and values, and I just want to say one more, I want to talk just briefly first about two of the other principles and values before I talk to you specifically about what we're doing. One is disability as diversity, not deficit. So what that's referring to is we're very proud of the diversity at Ryerson, the diversity in Toronto. Is something that there are slogans built around. We're very proud of that, but we're usually talking about cultural diversity, maybe LGBTQ, but when we think about disability, we usually think of it as a problem off here to be solved or addressed. And what I'm saying is that that experience of disability is a valued one as well, and should be considered part of diversity. And then the other one, I referred to both accessibility and accommodation, and understanding accommodation and accessibility as different approaches is really essential to the work that I do, because it is, I often say that accommodation is what you do when you don't have accessibility or when accessibility is not enough. So we can make things as inclusive and accessible upfront as we possibly can. And some people will still require individual accommodation. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just we want people to understand there's a relationship between the two. The more accessibility you have, the less individual accommodation will be required. And the other thing is, I come from disability studies background. I'm a graduate of the Disability Studies program at Ryerson, which is in the Faculty of Community Services, as is Social Services. And one of the foundations of disability studies is the social model of disability. And what the social model of disability says is that it's not the fact that I can't walk that disables me. I'm a wheelchair user. Clearly I can't walk. But that in itself is not what is disabling. What is disabling is the stairs between me and where I want to go. It's the attitude of someone who won't consider me as a potential employee. So those stairs, that attitude, that's what is disabling. So I just wanted to give you a little bit more of that background. Now, in terms of what I'm doing. I'm taking inquiries, telephone, email. So how that has changed, of course, is that it's all email all the time, as everybody else is dealing with, I'm sure. So lots of email, lots of dealing with responses. But the other thing that's changed is the kind of response, the kind of inquiries. So we're getting lots of inquiries around, how do I make a virtual meeting accessible? How do I incorporate captioning? How do I incorporate sign language into these, virtual meetings? We have an accessible IT specialist at Ryerson that is not part of my department. He works for CCS, which is as it should be. And so his work, a lot of his work is around ensuring not only that our websites are accessible, which is very important. And when I talk about accessible websites, I'm talking about making sure that it's accessible for people that are using assistive technology. So whether that's a device because they can't use a mouse, or whether it's software that turns text into voice for people that can't see the screen, the websites and the content that goes on it needs to be accessible. So in this virtual world we're dealing with now, he's very busy helping teaching departments to make sure that their teaching is going to be accessible come the fall as things are online, and in an emergency way, in what we had to do in March, to teaching people about virtual meetings and how to ensure that they're accessible. So that's a big part of what we're doing. I'm very involved in the Kairos blanket exercise. Have you had an opportunity to do the Kairos blanket exercise?
No.
I recommend it if you get the opportunity.
Okay, what is that exactly though?
So you should bug your instructors to look in how to do it. Actually, one of the things, it's an in-person exercise. I think they're looking at how they might be able to do it virtually. So my department, so accessibility, my role is, as you mentioned in the introduction, within the Office of the Vice President, Equity and Community Inclusion, as is Ryerson Aboriginal Initiatives and Ryerson Aboriginal Student Supports. And the Kairos blanket exercise was created outside of Ryerson, but Ryerson has taken it up and facilitates this. So it's an experiential exercise to bring awareness around the experience of Indigenous people for the last 400 years. It's a very moving, experiential kind of exercise. So they asked me to be involved to help to make sure that it's accessible. So we're having weekly meetings right now. So that's one thing that we're working on. And then another big one right now is looking towards orientation in September. For the last 5 years, I've conducted access tours as part of orientation, where it's especially geared towards people with mobility disabilities, to show them how to navigate the university in the most barrier-free way. Show them where Wheel-Trans picks up, or where the good accessible washrooms are, or how to get from building to building indoors as you can with several buildings. So this year we're not going to be able to do that, and so we're looking at other ways to increase awareness around accessibility overall for students, and we're looking at a few different options. So I'll be working on that throughout the summer. There's a couple of key.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because, as you said, with the blanket exercise, I think it's important to learn, like, from a different culture. Like, you have to do stuff, not just read, but as the blanket exercise, it creates activities and it creates, a closer connection. And then navigation that you're working on, it's very important to have like a sense of navigation, because that can consume a lot of time and effort and cause frustration. So I think what you're working on is very interesting. I appreciate that. Yeah. If you have any question, you can also pitch in anytime too.
Sure. I was just going to say that, just talking about the Kairos blanket exercise and also what I'm doing now, There's a lot of issues around intersectionality and disability. We all have more than one identity. And with what's happening with Black Lives Matter right now, we're getting lots of inquiries. Our department in general is getting a lot of inquiries around anti-Black racism and education. And there's, intersectionality with disability as well. So we are doing our own intersectionality around race and disability is something that not just race, sexual orientation, other identities, and intersectionality. That's something that is covered within disability studies, but this is something that there's been a lot more research happening around. So we're bringing ourselves up to speed, and we're trying to share that information as well within the university and respond to inquiries that we're getting.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any question for me so far, or can I?
Well, you talked about that you did community work at George Brown. So I'm just curious. I actually did community work at George Brown too before I came to Ryerson. I always went back to school while I was working because I started working quite young. And so I'm interested in sort of your trajectory and how you chose social work and psychology together with with an interest in mental health specifically.
Yeah, so as I said, I did the community work because I'm a shy person. So I think that would give me more open out there. And I need to understand the community too. When you're dealing with individuals, you have to understand their community and their identity and their background and their culture as well with respect to them, because I think to assist or help someone, you have to understand where they're coming from. Right. And so I went into social work because I've always been interested in social work. I like to give back. In a sense, my biggest choice too is that I just wanted a job that changed the world. I don't want to just go and make money and come home and do whatever. I want to not just make money but also make a difference, social difference, a big change in the world. I'm not saying other jobs doesn't change, the world and other people but I just want that feeling to you know, empower people, give them empowerment, make them feel good about themselves, show self-worth, you know. So that's mainly my goal in choosing social work. And growing up as an orphan too, it's struggling. And I'm a black woman from the Caribbean too. So there's not much about mental health, and we're not so open, I think, about mental health because we have to deal with all that, and we always have to put that face you're strong, you have to keep fighting, you're strong. But not everybody have the same willpower, and it's okay to have mental health. It's not something you choose. It's something that happens to you because of your life also. And another thing is that you might look fine, but disability doesn't have to be a physical disability. It can be a mental disability. So people walking around doesn't mean that they're fine. As I said, I use accessibility, I experience anxiety and so on. So, that's part of it. Anyone see me, I'm I'm fine, but it's not she's just fine. Anyone can have mental health issues. And I think it's important. So combining with psychology, social work is mainly about the what causing the social injustice that cause oppression for individuals. But I also wanted to understand the mental factor in psychology, the mental disorder, how the brain work as well, because it's not always have to be an issue, a public issue or something that causes someone to be depressed or whatever. So I want to understand I want to just understand everything in a whole. I want to understand the body as well as social structures and institutions and the government as well. So I want to be fixed. I want to fix the whole, and without understanding your mental capacity, it's to me it's not a whole because your physical and mental work together. So that's why I choose to minor in psychology. Yeah, so that's my story. And I like it. I really love both of them together. Yeah.
Here's a tip as a disability studies graduate. Disability studies has a couple of electives that are available
Yeah.
to social work students around madness, and
Mhm.
you probably find them very interesting.
Yes. So yes, I look into it more because I really want to, go out there, understand more about this, like understand myself and ways I can help like other people from different culture and to let them know it's okay, it's okay to be that. And also like I think the field need a little bit more diversity as well, like social work field, because I understand some people if you're struggling to explain like some people might be looking for someone like themselves to
Mhm.
explain more and understand more about what they're going through and feel more welcome to be open and seek assistance than just letting it boil over. Like knowing like I'm not the only one from this culture that's dealing with this, you
Yeah,
know. So yeah, so that's my
that's
main
great.
interest. Yeah.
Thank you.
So any more questions for me or I can go
Not right
on
now.
to the next one? Yeah. So the other question I have for you is, what is your motivation for your work?
Well, it's interesting because you said that you want to make a difference in the world.
Right.
And I remember being a teenager and thinking, I want to be able to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And as a young person growing up in an institution, I lived there from the time I was 10 to the time I was 18. And back then, there wasn't a lot of expectations for people. But I knew that uh, I wanted to do. I didn't want to. I think being a secretary was like pretty much the only thing, and even that. I mean, people, uh, institutions, therapists, doctors, their expectations can be very low if you have a disability.
Right.
So my motivation was around making a difference, um, and it still is. Uh, when I came to Ryerson from working in a hospital for many years, and my role there was to help people to access funding for the aids and devices that we made. And it was great. I was able to help people on a daily basis, and that was very rewarding. But I wasn't able to do anything to change the system. And especially after I mentioned that I went to George Brown, and then several years later, I went back to school and did Ryerson Disability Studies. It took me 6 years because I was doing it sort of one course at a time.
Right.
But uh, that experience taught me how I could make a difference to changing the system. And then the opportunity came
Mm-hmm.
for this role. And that really is the difference between what I was doing before and what I do now. What I do now, it's not as frontline, which I really miss, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, I'm able to make a difference and to change the system. And that in itself is really motivating. It's
Exactly.
also
Yeah.
very, it's also very frustrating,
Yes.
but
But it's worth it
there's
in the end.
success.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very it's very motivating itself.
Yeah. That's great. Um, so my last question would be, what keep you going up with against all these challenges? Like maybe I guess you might have like, as you said, like your social challenges, like getting in contact with people and accessing people and working from home must be frustrated because you don't have that face to face, you know.
Well, you know what? It's the uh, it's both good. It has its positives and negatives. I don't have 3 hours of commuting every day, uh,
Right.
which is great.
Yes.
Um, I miss I miss three-dimensional people. I miss being in contact with students, although I have had a little bit of contact with students as well and helping
Oh,
them
that's great.
work through some of the challenges. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of social barriers, I think, well, I mean, nobody's leaving their house much. So
Mm-hmm.
that's no different than anyone else. I'm very fortunate in that I do have a partner. My husband, um,
That's good.
uh, he does the shopping. He does most of the grocery shopping.
Mm-hmm.
I do, I can do some online stuff. But lots of people with disabilities don't have that.
Yes, yes.
Um, and I've been in touch with lots of people. Well, I'm keeping in touch with the same people way other people are. I spend more time on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
um, making Zoom meetings with friends. And I hear what other, some of the challenges, especially people that live alone,
Mm-hmm.
are working with. And for people with disabilities that use attendant care services, they're having to
Mm-hmm.
deal with, trying to get access to PPE.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of challenges that people with disabilities are facing that I'm not dealing with because
Right.
I don't need those things.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm dealing with the same things that everyone else is around social isolation and just, not being around the people that I want to be around.
Yeah. Hopefully everything will come back to normal and we can all go back to school.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is the end of my question. Is there anything you would like to ask me further or anything you would like to add before we wrap up?
I just want to say that this is a very interesting experience, and I think it's a great initiative. And I've learned from you as well. So
Yeah, I learned from you as well. It's very interesting work that you're doing, and for me, on behalf of everyone else, like I do appreciate that. And the part that sticks out to me is like the breaking down barriers thing. Like we need that with for the disability work that we're doing because it's important for everyone to, whether it's physical or mental, to feel like they can approach, assistance without being judged or like denied or anything like that. Yeah. So it's great work that you're doing and I appreciate that. Yeah. And as I said, like seeking services there, I felt very welcome and I felt that you guys are doing great. Like I was nervous, so that's good. So my
and
nervous went away when I came there.
great, that's great.
Yeah,
And
so
when you're
thank
back
you.
on campus, I'll take you on an access tour.
Yes, thank you a lot. Like I would like that. Yeah, a lot. So thank you so much, and thank you on behalf of Jack Layton Chair. We thank you for this interview.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.